Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the invisible engine that literally drives our modern world. We're breaking down the complex web of global events that dictate everything from international trade right down to your morning commute and, yeah, your wallet. We're going to dive into the global oil crisis, the real mechanics of energy stability, and exactly what happens next. So let's start with the big question that's echoing across Europe, Asia, the US, and the Middle East right now. Why are fuel prices rising again? To really understand this, we've got to look way past our local gas stations and check the pulse of a global economy that is currently under immense pressure. Because, it's never just about filling up your car, right? It's about the velocity of a massive domino effect. Step 1, fuel prices rise. Instantly, step 2 kicks in. Maritime and ground shipping costs spike because moving goods suddenly commands a huge premium. And that rapidly forces step 3, systemic inflation. Out of nowhere, food distribution, retail logistics, aviation, the whole shebang jumps in price. A localized rise at the pump infects your entire household budget almost overnight. Behind those price tags at the store is this massive, interwoven matrix of global pressures. We aren't just looking at local supply issues here. We're talking about international conflicts that can instantly disrupt global trade routes. We're factoring in highly fragile supply chains, deliberate production cuts, heavy international sanctions, and of course, the constant push and pull of economic demand. When global industries surge, they consume vast amounts of energy. And when economies throttle down, well, that demand heavily contracts. And that brings us to one of our most critical vulnerabilities, energy choke points. Take the Strait of Hormuz, for example. It's incredibly narrow, yet a massive percentage of the world's entire oil exports has to pass through it every single day. If even a rumor of military tension surfaces near this strategic waterway, shipping companies freeze up and global markets absolutely panic. Why? Because if there's one thing the market completely despises, it's uncertainty. Major oil-producing nations don't just pump blindly. They're constantly and strategically adjusting the levers of supply to match their own geopolitical goals. It's a really delicate balancing act. If they throttle back production while global demand stays hot, prices skyrocket. But if they open the taps and flood the market, prices plummet. These nations are effectively controlling international energy markets simply by turning a valve. Out on the open ocean, the stakes get even higher. Global trade relies on massive tankers moving all this energy around the clock. When those shipping routes face conflict, it's not just about a delayed delivery. Maritime insurance premiums absolutely skyrocket, and routes have to be drastically altered to avoid danger zones. In this industry, geopolitical risk translates directly into immediate, crushing costs on the water. And these supply chain shocks create localized political pressure cookers all over the world. In the UK and Europe, this crisis hits directly inside the home, with households grappling with severe spikes in electricity and heating bills. Meanwhile, in the United States, the pain is hyper-focused at the gas pump. That's a deeply sensitive political metric that dictates the cost of the daily commute for millions, and it heavily sways voter sentiment. Now, looking at all this wild volatility, you might be asking a very logical question. With all this instability, why don't we just rely entirely on renewables and electric vehicles right now? Why not just bypass the oil market completely to stabilize the global economy? Well, the answer lies in the friction between our long-term goals and our immediate reality. Yes, we are absolutely seeing massive, historic investments globally in electric vehicles, solar power, and wind infrastructure. But the reality on the ground is that modern economies, aviation, massive maritime shipping, and heavy manufacturing still critically rely on traditional fossil fuels just to maintain basic daily operations. To really ground our expectations here, we have to acknowledge a hard truth. Quote, the transition away from oil will likely take many years. Despite all those massive alternative energy investments and the urgent push for a green transition, oil remains strategically vital to global infrastructure. We simply cannot decouple modern civilization from this resource overnight without grinding global trade to an absolute halt. And to complicate things further, it's not just a simple equation of supply and demand anymore. The market is facing unprecedented external volatility. We've got unpredictable extreme weather events that are capable of crippling massive production infrastructure literally overnight. We have algorithmic financial markets reacting to geopolitical rumors in milliseconds. And crucially, we have surging domestic political frustration turning energy costs into major election-defining issues around the world. Because energy stability is so deeply connected to protecting the global economy itself, the ultimate question we have to ask is, what happens next? How do we navigate this incredibly complex, interconnected landscape where a rumor in one hemisphere spikes the cost of bread in another? Well, analysts have mapped out the future into three distinct potential paths. We're looking at either stabilization, volatility, or disruption. Let's break down exactly what each of these realities would mean for the global market. Scenario one is stabilization. This is obviously the most optimistic outcome. This happens if diplomatic efforts actually succeed in de-escalating international tensions, supply chains untangle, energy markets find a solid floor, and inflationary pressure finally cools off. This would give everyday consumers and businesses a real path to genuine economic recovery. Then we have scenario two, which is volatility. And frankly, this is the roller coaster we are riding right now. Markets remain hypersensitive to every single international headline. Prices whipsaw, they're up one week, down the next. It creates this tough environment where businesses freeze their expansion plans, and everyday consumers are just stuck navigating a prolonged state of economic limbo. The third, and for sure the most severe scenario, is disruption. This is the breaking point. If expanding conflicts completely destabilize critical maritime routes or threaten major energy infrastructure, the global market would fracture. We'd see aggressive compounding international inflation and a severe economic shockwave that would be incredibly difficult to reverse. Ultimately, these three scenarios explain precisely why distant geopolitical posturing feels so personal to us. A global event occurs, international markets and transport pricing react instantly to the risk, and inevitably, your household budget absorbs the shockwave right there at the grocery store or the gas pump. The macro always becomes the micro. Which leaves us with a critical realization about our modern world. Quote, "In today's economy, oil is no longer just an energy source, it is one of the foundations of global stability itself." As we watch the headlines and manage our own budgets, I want to leave you with this to think about. As nations fiercely compete for strategic influence and race toward new technologies, how long can this fragile foundation hold steady before the global economy fundamentally reshapes itself? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.